وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ فَسَتُبْصِرُ وَيُبْصِرُونَ.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah wa alihi sahbihi ajma'in. Thumma ma ba'd, a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. So, just continuing on in our series in the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we will continue now from what we were talking about last week in the previous session. In the previous session, we actually were talking about the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam coming to the age of marriage, right? And the Prophet والسلام, was approached by a few different proposals. We said beforehand, some books of Seerah they talk about this, but the very first serious proposal for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was that was proposed to him, and he was also very serious about it. Was the proposal from Khadijah radiallahu anha, and we started off by talking about the career, the professional life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and how he was a businessman by trade. He worked in business, and he took a couple of a serious business journeys. He started to work for Khadijah. So by now, the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was like a businessman, meaning he established his own, he established some form of income, right? Because this is the first step. Like when you want to get married, you first establish some form of income, and he had this now. And now he's got this, he would be able to support a family, and then he would be able to get married. And we talked about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam doing business and how honest he was, how amazing he was, how morally upright he was, ethically upright he was, and how Maysara, the bodyguard, the slave of Khadijah radiallahu anha, how he gave a full report on Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as well to Khadijah. And they made a lot of money. He made a lot of profit in the business. The first time when he worked for Khadijah, more money than anybody had ever made for her, and that was the first time that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam he worked for Khadijah. And then we mentioned that Khadijah spoke to afterwards her cousin Waraka as well about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who said, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is an amazing man. He's great. He's very honest. He's very noble. You've done business with him. He seems to be very honest. And then she speaks to her friend Nafisa, we mentioned this as well, who finds out that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam will also be interested in marrying Khadijah radiallahu anha, and because of her great character and qualities, she's honest, trustworthy as well. So, and every quality you would want in a woman, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam can see this in Khadijah also. So Nafisa, she takes care of that bit, and this is how the deals kind of worked out. So just moving on from just this introduction. So we've just given an introduction. So what we've said, initially that they're both interested, like Khadijah and Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam are both interested. Now, just to mention something in Islamic fiqh, which is, just mentioning this, as in the case of Khadijah radiallahu anha, like she was a widow, right? Like her previous husband had died. She had been married before. So what is the case of a woman that has never been married before? So a wali is like a guardian, right? We just go through what a wali is during the Nikkah, during the marriage. So a woman who's never been married before. So for example, just think of any woman, like she wants to get married and she's never been married before, right? Like this is the case mostly with women who are like a young and never been married before. When a woman who's never been married before, she gets married, she needs a male guardian. Like she needs a male to represent her in the marriage. She needs a wali. Islamically, in Islamic fiqh, like this is taken into account, that woman who's never been married, she has to be represented. Like someone needs to represent her in the marriage. And because of this, it's very obviously it's a challenging experience for a girl. She's never been married before. So she needs, walaikum salam, she needs somebody to basically help her in the experience, like somebody to represent her, somebody like a guardian, a wali, which is normally like her father, and it might be an uncle, it might be like an older brother. Is someone who mainly speaks on behalf of that girl and represents that girl during the marriage. So this is the requirement, like Islamically, and this is the case even at the time in Arabia, like before Islam. But what about a woman who has been married before? Remember, Khadijah, radiallahu anha, she has been married before, right? She's a widow. So what of the case? Like, does she need a wali? Does she need a guardian? Does she need somebody to represent her in marriage? So the thing is, if a woman has been married before, as in the case of Khadijah radiallahu anha, then Islamically in our fiqh and in rulings, in Islamic rulings, and it's the case, that if she has been married before, she is called a thayyib, which means she's been previously married. she's been married before, like she's divorced or she's husband has died, that doesn't matter. She's been married before. As long as she has been previously married, she is allowed to represent herself. She does not need like permission of a wali. Like she does not need um like a guardian to speak on her behalf. She can speak for herself, right? She does not need a male guardian, a wali to represent her in her marriage. You know, like a the wali gives her basically this permission, like I give permission for her, my daughter, or my niece or my sister to get married. So if a woman has not been married before, she needs a wali, a guardian to represent her. If a woman has been married before, then she does not need a wali to represent her in her marriage. And that's what we understand. And she does not need the consent of a wali, of a guardian. And this is the case, like we said, Islamically, and also this is the culture before Islam. At this time, where there's Khadijah radiallahu anha, like she's obviously interested in getting married. It's the case as well with her. She does not need a wali, like to represent her, because she has been married before. So that's just wanted to mention that, just for our understanding. Next thing we'll talk about is how old is Khadijah radiallahu anha at this time, right? How old is she? So, firstly, how old was the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam at this time, of marriage? Like now that he will get married to Khadijah radiallahu anha, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is 25 years old, right? He's 25 years old at this time. And how old was Khadijah when she got married? Well, if I was to ask you, you'd probably say what? Like the standard answer is she's 40, right? Like that's what you understand. She's 40 years old. That's what we typically understand. But there's actually very significant. So wali, yeah, wali. So somebody who's already married, she does not need the permission of a wali. Wali is a guardian. Thayyib, is that the one? Thayyib, a woman who's been married before. She's a thayyib. I think that's what you're asking. Okay, so Khadijah radiallahu anha, we understand there's a large group of scholars actually, there's a very significant large group of scholars. They have the opinion that Khadijah radiallahu anha, she was younger than 40 at this time. When she got married to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Ibn Kathir, rahimallah, like he's one of the scholars, like one of the great scholars. He's amongst them. Like he says, and going by the narration of Ibn Abbas, radiallahu anhuma, that Khadijah radiallahu anha, she was possibly in her early to mid 30s, right? This is, an understanding that she was in her early to mid 30s. So there's a school of thought that the more popular opinion that's typically written in books of Seerah, and this is what you've understood probably as well, is that Khadijah was at the age of 40. That might be some truth to that, yes. But then there's a significant amount of scholars of the Seerah, of the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who say that Khadijah radiallahu anha is actually, she was younger than 40, right? She was younger than 40. So some go as far as saying, like Abdullah bin Abbas radiallahu anhuma, he swears actually, he says, I swear by Allah, she was not a day older than 28. Like he actually says 28. So there's some opinions that say Khadijah was as young as 28, but that seems to be, not as popular. But Ibn Kathir, like he's one of them, says that, that's probably not the most reliable one. But the best position, like the most common opinion between scholars, like the position they take is she was around, mid 30s, 35, 36, maybe up to about 40. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. But from our understanding, we know Khadijah, when at the time she was going to get married, she was between the age of 35 to 40, right? So we can safely say, she's between 35 to 40 years old at this time. And she's been married before. She's been somebody who's been married before. She's a middle-aged woman. She's a very successful businesswoman. As somebody who's lived some life as well, she's very confident. She was, more than, comfortable. Like she could speak on her behalf, like we said. She would not need a wali because she's been married before. She's been married twice before, and both times her husband has died. So she's a widow, okay? Now, the next thing is the proposal. So what happens next is, at this time, Khadijah, she sends, so Nafisa, she goes back. So if you just remember the story, continuing from last week, goes back to Khadijah and says, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is interested. So remember Nafisa, she went to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She got to find out that, he's interested in Khadijah as well. So they're both interested. So what happens next? Nafisa, the friend of Khadijah, right? She then goes to Khadijah and tells her this, right? And Khadijah talks to her uncle. And there are some narrations that here's a difference of opinion in the books of Seerah, most of the books of Seerah say that the brother and uncle of Khadijah, radiallahu anha, they're the ones who are there at the proposal, right? And then at the Nikkah, like the marriage of Khadijah and the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And there's a small minority of books of Seerah that say no, it was Khadijah's own father, Khuwailid. Remember Khadijah bint Khuwailid? She's the daughter of Khuwailid, who helps with this. Like he's at the proposal. But, so either case, we understand it was the uncle or the brother of Khadijah who were there at the time, of the proposal, or it is the father of Khadijah as well. So there's a bit of a difference here, but it's a small detail. So from the family of Khadijah, right, they know, okay, Khadijah now, she's found out that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is interested. The family of Khadijah, what they say is, they send an official marriage proposal. This is how it works, they send an official proposal and they call for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to come and meet them. And this is how it works, isn't it? Like the family of the girl, they're sending like an official proposal to come and meet us. So the Khadijah, radiallahu anha, and her family, they sent a marriage proposal through, right? So this is what happens. And what happens is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he comes to meet Khadijah. So this is the time of the proposal at this time. So again, we're just at the proposal stage where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he comes to meet Khadijah and her family. And Khadijah, radiallahu anha, at this time, she addresses the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in a very loving way. She addresses him. What does she say? She says, Ya ibn Ammi. Ya ibn Ammi. That's what she says. She says, Ya ibn Ammi, which means, oh, son of my uncle. So she's calling him the son of my uncle. Now, what that means is it's a term of respect. Like, respect, like people would often talk to each other, they address each other like that. Like, for example, if you talk about the Prophet Musa, alayhi salam, he's very angry and frustrated. Do you remember when he comes back down the mountain and he sees the Bani Israel, they're worshipping the calf, and he's basically lashing out. He's angry with his brother Harun. And Harun, he addresses Musa, alayhi salam, his brother. He calls him, he responds to him by saying, Ya ibn Ya ibn oh son of my mother. Right? This is how Harun addresses his brother Musa, alayhi salam. So when you address someone like that, when you call someone the son of so-and-so, it's like you're showing respect to their father, respect to their mother. So when you address someone like, oh, son of my aunt, oh, son of my uncle, it means you show respect to their parents. Like you consider their parents your auntie or your uncle, right? Like when I meet a friend, and I say to the friend, I address him, when I meet the father of a friend, right? When I meet the father of a friend, I say to that father, uncle, isn't it? Like I say uncle. Like you say uncle, isn't it, to people who are your friends' fathers. If you say uncle, like even though he's not related, I say uncle, isn't it? It's because he's my friend's father, right? It's a term of, it's like showing respect, showing love and affection, isn't it? Like calling him uncle. So this is the same case. So Khadijah, radiallahu anha, she says to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ya ibn Ammi, which means, oh, the son of my uncle. Meaning, she considers the father of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam like her uncle. Get it? Like she's showing respect to the father, Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So it's like a loving way to address somebody. So Khadijah then, she says why at the proposal, she says why is she interested? She actually says to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, she says, I'm interested in marrying you because of your relationships in your family, how you maintain your relationships, and how you are the best of your people, and how you're honest, and how trustworthy you are. And because of your excellent character, and because of how honest you are in your speech, you don't lie, you don't deceive. You're very honest, you're a straightforward person. And that's why I'm interested in you. So she addresses the Prophet ﷺ, then she basically says that, because of this, I'd like to basically propose to you. I'd like to present this proposal of marriage to you. So again, the qualities that Khadijah is saying, we should try, obviously, put these qualities inside of us, It's obviously, honest, be honest, trustworthy, excellent character. This is the quality of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So again, we try and we try and follow this and try and incorporate these qualities inside in us as well. And then at the proposal, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he speaks as well. He also speaks, and he speaks about Khadijah, and he says, and tells her like why is he interested in marrying her. He says that she's the most honorable and dignified woman of the Quraysh when it comes to family and family background. She's the most honorable woman of the Quraysh, like literally from the Quraysh, she's like the most honorable woman. She's so noble. The Prophet ﷺ also praises her character, her qualities, her honor and her dignity, and he also praises her akhlaq, like we said, her character. So this is mutually both Khadijah and the Prophet ﷺ, they praise each other at the proposal. Now, at this point of time, like what happens next? Muhammad ﷺ, now he's been to the house of Khadijah. They've presented their proposals. Now he goes back. At that point, the Prophet ﷺ goes back to his house. Goes back, leaves the house of Khadijah, and he speaks to his own uncles, and he speaks to his family. So again, you see now he's getting his family involved at this stage where he's already gone. He's agreed for himself. He sort of found out about Khadijah and her family. He's found out, they're interested, I'm interested. Now he says, okay, I'm going to speak to my own uncles. So now he speaks to his uncles. He says that this marriage proposal has come, and he mentions it, regarding Khadijah radiallahu anha. What do you think? So he asks his uncles, and the uncles of the Prophet ﷺ say, we like this proposal. As long as you're okay, we're okay with it. Like, good to go. Like, as long as you're happy, we're happy. So the uncles of the Prophet ﷺ, Abu Talib and all the other uncles, they basically support him. Okay. So next is the Nikkah, right? So this is the, next stage. What happens next is the Nikkah. So, at this stage, what happens in a Nikkah? When you get married, like even in our culture, what happens is the Prophet, you and your family, like the boys, the guy's side, what they do, they leave together and they go to the girl, whether the wedding is in a hall or whatever, like the guy's side, they go with their family and they go to where the girl is. It's called the Barat in Urdu, right? It's called the Barat, but this is the same concept. Like this is what happened at the time. The Prophet ﷺ and his family, they leave together at the time of the Nikah. They leave together. So all the men's side, they're leaving together and they go to Khadijah, the house of Khadijah radiallahu anha. And what happens is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he arrives with his uncles, because you have to understand, like at that time, who's the family of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? It's basically his uncles, right? That's his family, because obviously his parents have passed away, and this is his main family, like his uncles. So they arrive at the house of Khadijah, and at this time, Hamza speaks on behalf of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because Hamza radiallahu anhu, he was the uncle of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? Hamza radiallahu anhu, but he was also the foster brother through milk of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If you remember, we spoke about this. The Hamza and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam are very similar ages, right? Even though he's the uncle, like his dad's brother, but he's very close in age to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They're all similar ages. So he was like, like an older brother. Like Hamza was like an older brother to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was very overprotective of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Like from the very beginning, he used to like protect him. And Hamza, radiallahu anhu, he's the one who speaks on behalf of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam at the Nikah. And they come to the house of Khadijah, radiallahu anha, and one of the narrations say, the father of Khadijah, Khuwailid, and this is going to be significant, like interesting, towards the end of the session, we'll mention something interesting. Her father of Khadijah, Khuwailid, he's also there. And Hamza, radiallahu anhu, he basically speaks that we've come here with our son, our nephew. This is a very cherished, very loved young man from our family. So we've come here with Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we're here for him to be able to marry your daughter, your niece, Khadijah bint Khuwailid. And at that point in time, the Nikah goes through and they perform the Nikah, the marriage contract, right? So you understand, they've done the Nikah, they've done the marriage contract. And so Hamza is the one who speaks on the behalf of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And what happens after this, Abu Talib, he also speaks and he says something significant. Now, some interesting details are mentioned in some books of narrations that as we go through this, just imagine you're Abu Talib, right? You're Abu Talib, you're the uncle of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? You've been his by-side, you've been his guardian from the age of 8, when his grandfather Abdul Muttalib died, right up to the age of 25, right? So you'll be looking after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you're his guardian for all this time. He's been protecting him, Abu Talib has been protecting him, keeping an eye out for him for all these years. Abu Talib is basically like a father figure of the Prophet ﷺ for like 17 years or so at this point. So it is said that Abu Talib, at this time of the Nikah, he addresses the family of Khadijah radiallahu anha and says, I want you to understand who this young man is. That yes, he's very honest, he's trustworthy, he's very nice, he's respectable, right? And the thing is that Muhammad ﷺ, but he is also very special. I want you to understand that he's very special. At the same time, I want you to understand how much work, how much effort has gone into taking care of him, of protecting him and raising him. And his father, Abdullah, he died before he was born. His mother died when he was a child. His grandfather, the great leader of our people, raised him for as long as he could. And since that day, me, Abu Talib, I've been raising him. And we all, everybody who's come into contact with him, this young man, knows one thing, right? There's something very special about this man. I want you to understand that when this marriage, nikah, this marriage is taking place, this nikah has taken place, that you people are receiving a treasure. Abu Talib says, you are receiving a treasure. And then he addresses Khadijah, right? And says, you are marrying the most amazing man. You are marrying the most amazing of men that I've ever known. I love this man. Abu Talib is saying, I love this young man just like my own son. But there's something very special about him. I want you to understand his blessing. So he needs to obviously tell her this and the family, because obviously he's been protecting him. He knows that this is a very special young man. And finally, last point. This point is a interesting point. We're gonna, just finish off talking about this. That something interesting is mentioned in some narrations, and we will mention this because there's a lesson in this. We can learn a lesson in this as well. That some scholars, in their books of narrations, in their books of hadith, they, such as Imam al-Bayhaqi, and Abu Haytham, other scholars, actually mention this. They say that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when this nikah was taking place with Khadijah, right? They say the father of Khadijah, radiallahu anha, he was there. Like he was there, he was alive, he was there at the time. And unfortunately, because of the culture of the time, it's said that, like Khadijah's father, he was drunk. Like he was basically at that time, during the whole nikah, the whole marriage was taking place. He himself was very heavily intoxicated. Like he was heavily drunk. Like he was out of his senses at this time when the nikah was taking place. Because obviously this was the culture at that time. And this doesn't get in the way of performing the nikah. Why? Because we said Khadijah, radiallahu anha, she's been married before. She's been twice married. She's a widow, but she can marry herself. She does not need the consent of a wali, of a guardian. Even by Islamic law, she can marry herself. But some narrations mention that Khuwaylid, he was actually very heavily drunk at this time. The marriage is happening and the nikah happens. And the marriage ceremony between Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Khadijah, radiallahu anha, happens. Everybody's celebrating at this time. So this is something interesting, and we're gonna actually leave it there because what happens next? What happens next? Because in this ceremony, so obviously this is what we understand from these narrations, that the father of Khadijah, yes, Khadijah's dad, Khuwaylid, he's actually drunk, and we will leave it there. And the next session, inshallah, we will continue. What lesson can we learn? What happens next? In the ceremony, like obviously, just imagine. The wedding's taking place between, obviously, the greatest human being, obviously, to walk the face of the earth, even in his wedding, marriage ceremony, like to somebody who's drunk. Like, can you imagine? Like, this is what the narrations say. And so again, this brings it all down to earth as well about, real life situations. And we'll see what happens next in this situation and what lesson we can take from this. So, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to really gain a love for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and really want us to give us a thirst for learning about his life and give us ability and understanding, of what we talked about, and allow us to follow and emulate, the character of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdika nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilaik. So we'll leave it there at this time, and during the nikah ceremony, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has now married Khadijah radiallahu anha.